Hey guys, what's going on? This is Ed from vinylalbumcovers.com, and I am getting out of a parking space. Um, okay, and you can tell this is happening at night, so sorry. It should sound better though. Um, I have a recorder in here that's doing that job, so I'm not using the iPhone for it. So hopefully at least it sounds good. Um, and I'm recording this in 4K to try to get whatever I can out of it. So apologies. Well, apologies if it looks completely terrible. My intentions were good. Anyway, I wanted to talk a little bit tonight about the real enemy. Hi, Sinead. But I mean the real enemy in terms of the music industry. Because chances are pretty good. I had to put my seatbelt on. Chances are pretty good it's not who you think it is. No, the real enemy, especially with regard to, like, think back to like the late 90s, right? In the late 90s, we had all kinds of record stores, and they were everywhere. We had Waxy Maxis, for instance. We had, it's been a long time. Sam Goody. We had Nobody Beats the Wiz. We had Tower Records, of course. Sam Goody. All the record towns, record worlds, tape worlds, all those things. But those are kind of like the mall stores that we didn't really go to seriously. Like those of us who were serious about getting our records, we were headed straight to Tower. Preferably the one in DC at 21st and I, or I would certainly go to the one out by Tyson's Corner. But the 21st at I was like the really good one. There was one at Landmark too, but we didn't go to that one really. I went every so often. I did go a lot when they were closing. But there were all these record stores that existed, all of them, so many. And then the way that most people tell the story is that Napster showed up and killed all the record stores. That's the way the story is generally told. And it is absolutely not correct. It's just not. The real truth is quite different. Let me take you through it. So when Napster showed up, Napster was merely a symptom of a bigger problem. See, by the time Napster showed up, record stores were overcharging. Let's think about this a little bit. Like late 70s, early 80s. We'll look at LPs because that's how you bought music. It was either LP, cassette. There were still some people who were hanging on to 8 tracks. I don't know who these people were. I wouldn't have wanted to have had anything to do with them. Because I can't imagine why anybody would elect to buy an 8-track. But that's neither here nor there. Records were priced thusly. It was $8.99 for a regular LP. And like $9.99 if it was like a current like blockbuster hit. There was this whole big thing with Tom Petty back then, who was fighting to make sure that his newest release was not priced at $9.99 because he felt that it was greedy. He felt $9.99. He felt that was greedy. Keep that in mind. Let that sink in for a second. Marinate on that, if you will. He thought $9.99 was greedy. Okay, fine. We can talk about inflation and things like that. But $9.99. He felt that $9.99 would be greedy. My gosh. Anyway, he refused to deliver his masters to the record label until the price of his album was listed at $8.99. He did get his way. And And I admire his spirit in doing that. I admire his motivations. All artists should feel that way about their fans. Most don't. Shame on those of you who don't. It's most of you. But this is kind of what we were dealing with in the late 70s, early 80s. Fast forward a bit, I believe vinyl didn't get much past $9.99, as I recall, as time passed. And we have to remember, too, that by 1991, there really was no vinyl. There was very little of it. Only the biggest artists, like Mariah Carey, for instance, she was one. All of her albums came out on vinyl. And there were others. We have a video by Louis Price that's currently being edited that sold about 3 copies. I bought one of them. It's a great album, and it's not a great album, that's not true, but he's a great singer. But for some reason, that was made available on vinyl. Quiz me as to why. I don't know. I can't figure that one out. And there were a couple of other things. I remember like Monster on a Leash by Tower of Power was on vinyl. I don't know why. Chicago 21 was on vinyl. Again, I don't know why. Donald Fagen's Comic-Kyriad was on vinyl. Now, those last 3 vinyl presses were not done in the U.S. They were done in another country, and I can't remember which one offhand because I'm old. But still, why were these records available on vinyl? None of them set the world on fire, so why would you find them on vinyl? Especially Louis Price. That made 0 sense. And Louis Price was available here in America. Go figure. But other than that, it was basically just like the really big selling artists that had their music on vinyl at that point. Nobody else did. Vinyl had fallen from fashion. Shit. Three, two, one. So vinyl had completely fallen from fashion by that point. Nobody wanted it. Or really, it was the domain of DJs. DJs wanted it, but nobody else did. Anyway, fast forward, and of course, well, not fast forward. There's no need to fast forward. We actually should go back a bit. About 1986, earlier than that, 1982, we had the first CDs, but they weren't really in the mass market like that. They were very much the domain of the audiophiles. Billy Joel was the first CD. 52nd Street, I think, was the first CD. And then they kind of started rolling out mostly in Japan. Slowly but surely, we got them in America and their corresponding CD players, which were priced through the roof. CDs caught on big time right around 1987, 1988. We started to see them in other places, and people started to snap up CDs. But it was the adults that did it. The kids didn't. And I was a kid then. I was like 15. But I didn't do that. I didn't have CD money. I had cassette money, and there was no vinyl, so I just buy the cassette. I bought the cassette of a lot of things. Even though I knew it sounded terrible, it was what I could afford, so that's what I did. Such was the landscape of music by the time Napster showed up. There were CDs, plenty of them. In fact, CD was the way that you bought music. There were still some cassettes, but people didn't really buy them. I mean, they weren't popular. People finally started to figure out how bad they were, and nobody really wanted them. I certainly didn't. I would never even consider buying a cassette at that point. Hi there. There's a little light. It won't last. See? Told you. Anyway, by this point, CDs were going for like $18.99. Higher depending on where you were. And cassettes were not a factor, really. Cassette singles were a factor. Those were out there. Those were like $1.49. The CD maxi singles were like $2.49, sometimes more. That's what I remember the pricing structure back then. So my point in telling you all of this is that CDs were overpriced back then. They had been $16.99. back in like 1987, and the prices were going steadily up by, a dollar here, a dollar there. And by that point, by the point at which it kind of broke the back of the consumer, we were talking like $19.99, sometimes $20.99 for a CD, depending on where you were. And this was the condition of things before Napster showed up. So everything was overpriced, like way overpriced. So when Napster showed up, the real problem wasn't Napster. Napster was merely a reaction. It was people going, and mostly people my age and younger, people going, I'm not spending $20 on a CD anymore. How about I get it for nothing? I can get it for nothing. Why would I spend $20? And so they did. Napster went crazy quickly. People were using it just like I've never seen an adoption of anything that quick. Keep in mind also, this was at the infancy of broadband internet. And when broadband internet showed up, the problem got worse because people could download big files real quick. Used to be that when you would download a song, you would, if it was something that was in good enough quality, if you cared about quality, like I did anyway, and I won't pretend I didn't use it, I did. I didn't use it a lot, but I did use it because I wasn't much for the poor sound quality that most people had stored on their hard drives. I wanted the good quality. So I didn't use it all that much, but many people did. Many people really used it. My roommate used it a lot. And I don't know that I blame him. But you used to, back to what I was saying, if you wanted like a really great sounding file that somebody had, you would have to start downloading before you went to bed. And by the time you woke up in the morning, you would have it if that person had kept his computer on all night long. If he turned it off, you would have nothing. You just have a piece of a file that didn't finish because dude decided to turn his computer off. So this was a problem. This was a very real thing that we dealt with in the Napster days back then. That's just an aside more than anything. But the big thing to note about Napster is that Napster absolutely let the digital cat out of the bag, in the sense that all of a sudden you could get what you wanted for free, and you did not have to spend $20 on a CD. You could, if you had broadband internet, as I did, and as a lot of others did back then. Adoption of broadband internet was really swift. So a lot of people had it. So they'd have a cable internet connection, and they could download an entire album, within an hour, less than that. And this was pretty remarkable stuff. And it was, for those who wanted a lot of music, it was a real boon to them. And they didn't have to pay for it. Was it right? No, of course it wasn't. It's stealing. But the artists themselves, especially Metallica and the others, they were focused on the wrong thing. And most of the general public, I feel, was focused on the wrong thing. The enemy was never the consumer. People thought it was, and it wasn't. The enemy was the record label. The record labels were setting list prices that were exorbitant. Record stores had to make enough money to justify carrying the album. They had to make a profit. So they then had to jack the prices up even further. Now, we could look at, like the mall shops and go, well, they took it too far. I don't know that I'd even disagree with you if you did that. But, because they probably did. But a lot of it was the record companies setting the list prices. So my point in telling you all of this, hi there, We're at a red light. My point in telling you all of this is that there are so many people, so many music listeners that have gotten confused about who the real enemy was, what the real problem was. And people have been very quick to paint Napster as the enemy. Napster was not the enemy. Napster was a reaction to a problem that occurred before it even existed. So the real enemy was the record label and their greed. And we know this definitively now, even in 2023, because if you've noticed, if you go into there are very few actual record stores, but you can go into places like Barnes and Noble, for instance. They have a record section. Or you can go into some Best Buys, and they will, or Urban Outfitters if you must. You'll also find cassettes there. Stupefyingly, you'll find cassettes. But you can go into places like that, and you'll see these albums, these single disc albums that are priced. Remember what I told you, how much I told you that LPs were going for, back in the 80s and into the 80s and into the 90s, if you could find them in the 90s. They're going for $20 now, sometimes more. Further price gouging by the record labels, which is odd to me on several different levels. It's odd because it's clearly too much money, and it's odd because it's the same thing that they were giving us before, but it's 180 gram. You say that's a negligible increase in manufacturing. Really, it is. It's a matter of cents to use a little more vinyl. And I hate to break it to you kids, but 180 gram vinyl is really no better than 150 gram vinyl. Flat vinyl is flat vinyl. You can still find warped 180 gram vinyl. You can. I know you can find it. I've had it and given it back because I'm not doing that. But these record labels, of which there are really only three, there's Universal, there's Warner's, and there's Sony. Those are the three that are left out of all the record labels that used to exist. And of course you can go, well, there's Blue Note, and Blue Note's Universal. Well, but what about Atlantic? That's Warner's. There's RCA, RCA's Sony. They're all tied to one of those big three. All of the ones that matter. There are indie labels, but they're not profit making. That's just not what they are. And really, if we're being honest about it, really the others aren't either. The big ones really aren't. They're all in business doing other things. I mean, Sony is not just a record label. Sony makes movies, and they don't make movies now, but thank you, strike. But they do a lot of other things. They sell electronics and PlayStations and so on and so forth. Warner's is basically owned by investment bankers. They do a bunch of other things that have nothing to do with the music. Universal makes movies and a bunch of other things, and they're not just music, not at all. Music is like a side hustle for all three of them, and they probably don't make much money with either one. They probably don't make much money making music, but there's still price gouging. Like, the price gouging has continued down to this moment. You can go into a Barnes and Noble and see records priced for entirely too much. And I keep waiting for the vinyl lovers to just decide, and I'm one of them, by the way, but to just decide that they've had enough and they're not paying those prices. I mean, I don't. I rarely do that. It's got to be something I really want to do that. I generally don't spend that money. If I want albums, I'll go on Discogs and get used vinyl. I'm perfectly willing to do that. You can call me whatever you want for doing it. Don't really care. I'm just not parting with that much money for something that shouldn't cost anywhere near that. If you want to get upset with the record label. Again, as we've said, the record label is the enemy. It isn't us. And they've learned absolutely nothing over all this time. And shame on them. They should have. So I just wanted to put that out there. It's important to kind of, it's important to kind of, realize who the actual enemy was during that period of time, because they are still the real enemy now. Thankfully, it's my firm belief that we don't even need record labels anymore. We really don't. I mean, record labels were useful for promotion. They still, they still have their use there, I suppose. But really, I mean, they were good for like pushing singles to radio. Let me ask you something. When was the last time you listened to radio? Have you listened to the radio recently? I know I haven't. Why would I? Why would anyone? Radio is the domain of like doctor's offices. Nobody cares about radio anymore. The luster has completely worn off, and we don't care about radio anymore. I absolutely don't. I haven't turned mine on in years. I have no reason to do so. I don't discover music via the radio. I don't think many people do. We look at, we'll go to like, for me, I go to YouTube and I go to other places like that in order to discover it. But I certainly don't do that otherwise. I don't listen to the radio to do it. That's the last thing I do. And so it's, it's just radio's not a thing anymore. So and that's what record labels were good for. So if we don't have radio, what do we need record labels for? I'm just asking. Because you can do most things yourself. And if you're an artist, you can put your own music out there. Bandcamp, YouTube, SoundCloud, whatever. You can put it up on Apple Music yourself. There's just so much you can do on your own. You can promote on your own. You have access to the exact same things the record labels would use. You have your... Oh, this is well lit. You have YouTube. You have Twitter. You have Facebook. Excuse me, not Twitter, but X. You have Threads. You have all of these social networks that you can use in order to promote your stuff. You really don't need record labels anymore. No one does. So, I mean, the world is your oyster, kids. Figure out how to use it. And frankly, let's go here. I'm gonna air it all out. If you sign to a record label these days, the chances are pretty good you'll be signed to a 360 deal. Do you know what a 360 deal is? Well, I'll tell you what a 360 deal is. A 360 deal is when you sign to the record label, they take a piece of everything, all 360 degrees of your career. So they get a piece of your album, of course, a giant chunk of your album. Don't think you're going to make money selling an album, because you won't. But they'll take a giant chunk of that. They will also get a piece of your concert sales, your ticket sales. They'll get a piece of your merch. Everything. Anything that you make money with in music, they will get a piece of. That's what a 360 deal is. And 360 deals, and also your music publishing. 360 deals are incredibly dangerous. Incredibly dangerous. And they should not exist under any circumstances. But they do. For some reason, people have allowed them to exist. And shame on those who allow it. Because if you don't write songs, you don't get a piece of that. It's my firm belief that if you don't write songs, you shouldn't get a piece of the publishing. That's specifically reserved for people who actually put the work in, put the inspiration in, and write songs. That is how I feel. Because it's only right. They shouldn't get a piece of your ticket sales. They're not out doing the show. If you're out doing the show, fine. I understand. But you're not. So spare me. You don't get a piece of that. That's not fair. But these artists who think that record labels are the be-all, end-all, they sign these deals, and then record labels go, see what I told you? He signed it. This one signed it. This one signed it too. So sign it. You don't have a choice. If you don't sign it, somebody else will. And I know that because this one, and this one signed one. So it's just all kinds of problems have been created. The record business is in absolute shambles, like I've never seen before. And it's probably coming to an end at some point. Like the business as we know it has to fundamentally change because the record business has learned nothing. The record labels themselves have learned absolutely nothing, even given the fact that there are far fewer of them. I mean, there is no Capitol Records anymore. Think about that. There's no Capitol Records. Capitol Records is now owned by Universal because they couldn't stay in business, because nobody was buying the music, because they were price gouging. I know I'm passionate. It is what it is. I'm that guy. Sorry. I hear myself doing it. It's really funny. I've also had a bad night, so that's not helping either. But please forgive me. It's just, the record business is just a mess. All of it. There really is no RCA Records anymore, if I'm being honest about it. There's no RCA anything anymore, really. RCA is just a logo. RCA is owned by Sony. It's Sony Music Entertainment. Just like there's really no Columbia Records and there's really no Epic Records. It's all Sony. Warner Brothers doesn't exist. It's now Warner Records. They don't own the copyright for Warner Brothers anymore, and the crest is gone. That's why you don't see it, because they don't own it anymore. So they had to come up with a new awful-looking logo and a new name in order to continue to exist, because they lost the copyrights expired on all of Warner Brothers stuff. So you'll never see those logos again, which is a real shame, because, I mean, who doesn't love a good Warner Brothers crest? I ask you. Record labels as we knew them don't exist anymore. Elektra is owned by Atlantic Records, which itself is owned by Warner Records. So, I mean, how much of Atlantic even exists? Warner isn't the same. So how much of Atlantic can there be? And there certainly can't be much of Elektra. Yeah, like that. Like, it's all just very different, and it's almost like the music business is just hobbling along under the pretense of existing, when really it doesn't. It's all very strange. But to go back to my original point, the whole thing began when the record industry got greedy and decided to charge an arm and a leg for their albums. And then Sean Fanning and the other guy, I can't remember his name. I told you I'm getting old. They formed Napster as a reaction to the fact that record labels were overcharging. And people just decided they'd had enough. And the entire music industry slept on this digital revolution that was happening right under their noses. They fell asleep and didn't pay attention and didn't try to take advantage of it. And we have Spotify and we have Apple Music and Tidal, but we have them all belatedly. It's too late. It doesn't matter. Why would I spend money downloading songs or streaming them when I can get them for free? Because I can. I mean, anything that's up on Apple Music, or anything that's on Napster or Napster, anything that's on Spotify or Tidal, I can get it for free. Why wouldn't I? Now, to be honest with you, I don't. I spend money on Apple Music every month. I do that. I admit it. But I don't have to. I just do it because it's easy. But you can find all of that stuff on YouTube. In fact, you can even find things on YouTube that you can't find on the streamers. They have weird things there. Those kaleidoscope things, for instance, that I did a Slept On episode on some time ago. Those songs are not available on Apple Music. But you'll find them on YouTube because somebody put them there. Heck, for a while I had them on this channel. I may put them back because they're great songs and people should be able to hear them. But they're not being actively distributed because they're just promos. But they're great. You'll find a bunch of things that are not available on Apple Music, yet you'll find them on YouTube. And this whole thing started because of record company greed that brought us Napster. So again, we need to recognize the real enemy. The real enemy wasn't Napster. It wasn't really the record stores. It was and continues to be the record labels themselves, or what's left of them. I would very much love to get into a dialogue about this. I think it could be fun. So if you're interested in doing that, the comment section, right down there, hit me up. Let me know what your thoughts are. I'd be very interested to hear them because I find this stuff absolutely fascinating. So yeah, let me know what your thoughts are. I have a Slept On episode in the can. I mentioned it just a few minutes ago, and this will probably beat it to the channel. because this is just so much easier to do. I can literally just throw this up as it is, and I'll have to, obviously now I've made things a little bit more difficult because I'm going to mix this new audio track in with it to make it sound good, to make it tickle your eardrums, anything for you. But I'll do that, and there is, like I said, there's a Slept On episode in the can. It's being edited as we speak. I just need to, I still need, there's a lot to do on it. There's a lot of B-roll. I do B-roll and stuff, and yeah, I get cute with Slept On, so it's going to take a second, but not too long. Heck, you may end up with it by the end of the day tomorrow. I don't know. Or by the end of the day today as you're watching this, because I'm actually doing this not today, but yesterday. Shut up, Ed. Anyway, I've added albums to the site. I actually got a copy of A Future Street by Pages, and I wanted to put that up there. And when I bought it, the seller said that it was in excellent condition. He lied. It's not in excellent condition at all. It's got scrapes on it, and it's not. I don't think I can do this one, guys. So it's probably a bit late to send it back because I was doing a bunch of other things at the time, and I've been very, very busy, and I just haven't had time to deal with it. Now I think that the time to return it has lapsed. Poor me, right? So I'll get another copy of it. It better be what it says it is, or else. And I'll put that up there. Other things have gone up since, so please feel free to go check out the site. Can't think if there's anything else. Yes, there is. We are on Threads because everybody else is, and I want to be one of the cool kids. Dang it! So I wanted to be on Threads, so we are. So if you go to Threads, you will find us there. Threads is still trying to get its thing. Try this again. Thread is still trying to get its thing together, so it's not quite what it should be yet. So we're there, and every once in a while I'll post something. Like if we have a new video or something, I'll post it. But it's a little clunky right now, and I really dislike the fact that I'm looking at all these posts from people that I don't follow. I don't really feel like looking at a bunch of political stuff. That's just not my thing. I'm music and music only. I don't want to get into that. Somebody else can do that if they want, but I don't want to do it. So, got to figure out how to deal with that, and then we'll be on Threads even more. If they can get their thing together, I'll leave X behind, because I can already see like how Threads could be better, and I can certainly see how bad X has become. So. I'm not really on Facebook all that much. I think I'm walking away from Facebook because nobody's really looking at anything on Facebook at this point anyway. Facebook is very much kind of the domain of older people. And yes, before you think it, yes, I know I'm older. But it's not really my scene, and nobody's interacting with us there. And most of the interactions occur elsewhere. So yeah, probably won't be too much longer on Facebook. But at any rate, we are on the social networks. I am talking way too much. Get the feeling I still have more driving to do? Because I do. But I'm not going to make that your problem. So thank you so much for watching. Leave comments down there. Let's dialogue this. Let's really talk about it, because I think it's worth talking about. If you feel that the enemy was the record store, I'll hear you, because I'd see where you were coming from. If you feel that Napster really was the enemy, tell me how you feel. I'm interested. Maybe you can change my mind. My mind is certainly open. So let me know what you think. I'm interested. I keep saying that because, darn it, I mean it. But until we see each other next time on the next video, and you can't see me at all, so how ironic is this? Keep listening to great music. You see my thumb anyway, right? Yeah, you do. Okay. Bye, y'all.